Good afternoon, everybody. This is attorney Marjorie Brunelli, and today I have another guest. Today I have a psychotherapist, Najla Sallum, and I'm going to let her introduce herself, and then we're going to discuss a few areas of the law that are important to get therapy, that I recommend my clients to go to therapy and talk to a psychologist or a psychotherapist. So Najla, it's a pleasure to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you. Well, thank you for having me. Like you mentioned, my name is Najla Sallum. I am a psychotherapist here in the United States, and the name of my company is Center for Immigration Evaluations. I am a psychotherapist. I see clients privately, and I also conduct immigration evaluations. So thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. You're welcome. Thank you for accepting my invitation. I appreciate it. So one of the things that I always get asked in the office is, relating to family law, because I deal with a lot of clients who are going through a divorce. Sometimes they have domestic violence also running at the same time as the divorce proceedings. And a lot of the times, some of those clients have minor children. So what can you recommend to those clients? Because, there's a lot of frustration, sometimes anger, sometimes domestic violence, some sort of abuse, be it financial, verbal, emotional, physical, sexual. So there are different types of abuse, sometimes between the married couple, sometimes involving the children. So what would you recommend for people going through a divorce or, a situation with domestic violence?
I mean, the first thing I recommend is acceptance for the parents. Accept that we are in the situation of divorce, which is a very unpleasant situation. But if we decided to get to this point, is because it was necessary. So the first thing I recommend is acceptance. Understand that that this is a difficult situation, and it's about making executive decisions as opposed to emotional decisions. When it comes to children, minors under 18 years old, children are very vulnerable for the main reason that children they can't help themselves. Children are considered a vulnerable population because they can't help themselves. It's not like they can, during an argument, they can just pick up the keys and, you know what, I'm going to go rent a hotel. Kids can't do that. They're vulnerable. They psychologically and emotionally require guidance. And during a divorce, there are a lot of emotions flying. Very, very rarely, I'm sure you can speak of that. Very rarely divorces are amicable. Very rarely, right? I mean, probably get one out of 1,000. So there are a lot of emotions flying.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, sure.
Even when they think it's going to be amicable, a lot of times that happens, that I'll have people come to my office and say, no, we're in agreement with everything. And then once they start discussing how they're going to divide property or time sharing for the children or child support or alimony, it turns into a litigated divorce. So that's very
right. So exactly. So there are a lot of emotions flying, and like I said, kids, they require guidance all the time. It's not like, you're applying for divorce and now all of a sudden you're taking a break. That doesn't happen. So it's very important for children I highly recommend for children, the adults as well, but specifically the children, to seek therapy, for parents to seek therapy. Looking from a child's perspective, the people that they love the most in the world, or the people that they expect to take care of them, are going against each other. And sometimes the child may be in a situation where they're like, oh, I don't want to take mommy's side. I don't want to take daddy's side. I don't want to burden them with my feelings. Maybe they see mom crying and they don't want to be a burden and talk about their feelings. Maybe they see dad being aggressive and they feel bad for mom, or they don't want to add to dad's stress. So it's important in this, specifically in divorce. It's very important for kids to find someone they can talk to. And the benefit of us psychotherapists is that we are trained to do this. Our job is to when the child comes in, our job is to see things from the child's perspective, So we're not taking mom's side, we're not taking dad's side, we're seeing things from the child's perspective. And the child needs that, some form of guidance, especially during this big change in her or his life.
Right. I think that's very important. And, yesterday I just did an interview with Jamili Pelliser. She is an immigration attorney. And we actually touched on that subject. And that's why I decided to invite you to speak today. Because, and I've been through therapy for many years. I love it. I think it's super interesting how you get to know yourself and also understand just the human psyche a little bit more. I think that just makes for a better person and also for better relationships in your life. But that's just my take on it.
No, you're right.
I always recommend my clients, particularly when the divorce is getting ugly and I can see that the frustrations are getting out of hand. There's a lot of anger involved. And sometimes, unfortunately, you see parents kind of using the children, pushing the children against each other. And that happens a lot. And I think it's unfortunate. And the other thing also and correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't know if this is correct, but I've heard that all the problems that we have in our adult lives, they develop at some point during our childhood, generally between 0 and 6 years old. So for those children going through a divorce and watching the parents fighting, and like you said, being stuck in the middle and not knowing how to deal with it because they are not emotionally developed yet. They don't have the maturity to know how to deal with that. I think that's very important, to have the child or the children going to a therapist that can assist them as well as the parents.
For sure. No, you're absolutely correct. And actually, I have bad news. It's not up to 6 years old. It's up to 17 years old. So personality, yeah. So personality forms up by 7 years old, but self-esteem develops until 17 years old. So between those are called the formative years, psychologically and emotionally formative years, between 0 to 17. And that's when all of us that were children between those ages, that's when we're learning who we are in the world. So the dynamic between the child and the adult teaches the child who they are in the world. So basically, you're absolutely correct. Our self-esteem develops until the age of 17. So whatever we learn about ourselves, whatever happens until 17 years old, we carry until the rest of our life. So for example, interesting, you mentioned immigration. There are a lot of abuse, domestic violence that happens in scenarios where one of the spouses is an immigrant. And let's say that the abusive partner is the dad. And the dad, when he becomes abusive with the wife, most likely he also becomes abusive with the child. So can you imagine that child growing up listening, hearing you're good for nothing, you're horrible, you're an idiot, just like your mom, Yeah. The child will grow internalizing that, really believing that. So that's why it's super important for therapy. Children need therapy during a divorce. Actually, children need therapy whenever I would even recommend before and after a divorce, when you see that things are, for your clients, for example, that might be listening to this, before a divorce, when we see that things are going down are derailing, I highly recommend that we start therapy so the child can receive that guidance and understand that, no, it's not their fault that daddy's stressed. It's not their fault that mom is abusive, So yeah. Internalization, yeah, it happens. Internalization happens between 0 and 17 because that's when we're learning who we are in the world. And just really quickly, just to talk about domestic violence from an immigration perspective. So immigration allows, has a petition called VAWA that allows for immigrants that entered a marriage with a citizen or a resident and then when the marriage becomes abusive, immigration has an application for that, which is called VAWA. I mean, I'm not an immigration attorney, so,
Right. Actually,
they can explain better. But from a
right.
psychological,
Yesterday, Attorney Palliser, she explained how that works and how that bypasses some of the, I don't want to say rules, but like it diminishes the time, the waiting time for certain things. So people go watch that video. It's in Portuguese, but we also speak English everywhere. So
yeah, right.
trying to clarify it. But go ahead.
But
Sorry.
yeah, no, it's fine. Exactly. It does. From what I understand, yeah, if you entered a marriage with your American spouse, out of good faith, but then that marriage revealed itself to become abusive after marriage, where, your spouse threatens you and is psychologically, emotionally, not necessarily just physically, because there is abuse, psychological and emotional abuse. So after your American spouse becomes abusive after marriage, yeah, immigration offers that. It's an application where you can get help, and you don't have to stay in that marriage just because it's abusive. But anyways, in situations like that, I provide immigration evaluations to explain just that. And I've done several evaluations where the abuse was also directed towards the child. So unfortunately, that happens. But even when the abuse is not directed towards the child, when the abuse happens between the couple only, the child is experiencing that. The child feels, or the adolescent, like I said, between 0 to 17, basically that person who didn't ask to be there is there witnessing that. So that can affect the child or the adolescent's self-esteem, ability to perform well at school, ability to have friends. It can lead to depression, anxiety, separation anxiety, OCD, you name it. And like you mentioned, a lot of these issues, if untreated, will lead into adulthood. I have a lot of patients that come in my office today. With my patients that I don't do immigration evaluations with, I do I do regression with them, psychological regression. And I have to tell you, all these clients, I want to say 99% of these clients that come in with anxiety and depression, they're adults and they're like, I don't know where this comes from. My life is great, but I still don't know where this comes from. When we do the regression, we find out that something happened between those years. And a lot has to do with parents.
Right. That's what I've learned through therapy, and not just myself, but also from clients and people that I know, friends, family. You always find something. It's really, I hate when people say, oh, why do you go to therapy? Are you crazy? Therapy is not for crazy people. I think that if everybody went to therapy, the world would be a better place.
Absolutely.
Because you have a better understanding of who you are, what things trigger you, where, for example, anxiety is coming from, your depression is coming from. If you have, I don't know, PTSD or some sort of trauma, you're able to process that. Because, for example, like we were mentioning children, they're exposed to sometimes horrible situations and scenarios when the parents are fighting and there's abuse and violence. So that needs to be addressed. Otherwise, that child is going to grow up to be a mess of a person, just a train wreck. Let's be honest, that's what happens. I see it all the time. One of my cases, just as an example, and it's obviously I'm not going to mention names, but a couple have, they still have it, but let's talk in the past. So it's a little more discreet. Two children, and both of which were teenagers. One was a preteen, the other one was close to 18 years old. And one attempted suicide, and the other one started cutting herself.
Yeah.
So it's to the point that she cut herself so much, she's going to need plastic surgery because she's got scars all over her body. So that's what you're doing to your children when you don't address what's happening. And it's sad to see. Nobody wants to see that. That's one of the things in divorce cases that affects me the most, because adults, I'm not worried about the adults. Go to therapy. That's your job. It's your responsibility. But like you said, children, they don't have anybody to protect them. They're the victims of the situation. That's how I see it. So I always recommend therapy. I think it's super important and it's extremely helpful and needed. That's the thing that people don't understand. Crazy people don't go to therapy. You're looking
No, we
for
don't.
your health and the health of your child or children. So I appreciate you saying that.
No, absolutely. And it's funny because I laughed when you said crazy people don't go to therapy, because that's exactly it. People that need it the most are, let me rephrase that. People who refuse therapy are usually the ones that need it the most. Everybody
Exactly.
needs therapy.
The ones in denial.
The ones in
Yes.
denial, the ones who always blame everybody else, and but I just wanted to go back and speak a little bit about what you said. I mean, I what I can recommend to parents is, whether they're divorcing, going through a horrible divorce, whether they're in my case, if they're going through an immigration process, like a domestic violence immigration process, and they're in a horrible marriage and they're applying for VAWA and they're doing an evaluation, therapy is good, because again, an evaluation is just right there. We're doing the analysis and I'm reporting what I saw. Therapy is the actual treatment. But like the first thing I said was, the first thing that parents need to understand is acceptance. It's I don't like, as a psychotherapist, I never speak from a blameful kind of way. And the best recommendation I can make is, look, I think that everybody's trying their best with what they have. And unfortunately, if it got to a point where the marriage needed divorce, it's not your fault. You did your best, but you're not done. Children still need help, like you said. Keeping children from therapy is not doing them favor. It's not doing them favors, or having the mentality, like you said, of denial. Oh, the child, my son never saw me arguing, or it's in the past. He doesn't talk about it, so maybe he didn't even hear. Trust me, children, if they're around, they're listening, they're hearing, they're feeling. Before children become verbal, they understand tone of voice, mannerism, schedules, structure. So when that's affected, children feel emotionally and they feel psychologically. So we're not doing any favors. We're not doing children any favors when we refuse to get them help. And psychotherapy can only do benefit. It doesn't do any harm. It helps, it brings up a lot, and it solves a lot. So I highly recommend it. Therapy is always good. Always good.
Like if you don't think of anything else, this is what I always tell my clients: if you cannot process anything else because your world is falling apart, process this: children are like sponges. They absorb everything. That's how I see it. I'm not a therapist, but I see it in my daily business life, let's put it that way. In my profession, I see it all the time. They absorb everything. You can see it in the child's face. Now, of course, with the pandemic, I'm not seeing people in person, but in the past, when a mom or a dad would bring the child, you can see in that child's face the pain. You can see it. The parents don't see it because they're caught up in their own feelings and their own nightmare, but you can see it. So just remember that, they absorb everything and they internalize everything. So it's definitely needed, and I think it's very important. And I really appreciate you talking on this topic today. If you want to leave all your contact information, I'm also going to post it either above or below this video when I'm ready to post it. But go ahead and give all your contact information, please.
Yeah, so I like, you're just piggybacking on what you were saying. I highly, it's not about you. I say that kindly to parents, and maybe that's something you can tell your clients. Look, kindly speaking, it's not about you. It's about the children, that's the kindest thing you can do for children. Get them help, when you understand your limitations, and just understand what you need to do after that, beyond that. But yeah, I mean, I'd love to help whoever needs help with either psychotherapy or immigration evaluations. As you mentioned, when divorces are ugly, abusive, and when there is an immigration, if you're illegal, I'd love to help. My phone number, my business phone number is 954-513-8037. Again, my name is Najla Sallum, and my phone number is 954-513-8037. I'd love to help.
you speak, Najla? What languages?
Portuguese and Spanish.
Okay, so no excuse.
Yeah.
Well, I also speak Portuguese, as you all know. My Spanish is a little rusty. I prefer not to give legal advice in the Spanish unless it's written. I can't. Najla, I really appreciate it. We'll talk soon.
Thank you so much. Take care. Bye.